could have been? What could have been? I'm going to tell you a story. It's a story about our journey. It's a story about how we got to where we are today. The journey began in a garden a long, long time ago. God the Father, the maker of heaven and earth, of all that was seen and unseen, created out of nothingness this world in which we live. And in the midst of that creation, he decided to create mankind, to give life and to breathe into us. From nothing he created us, male and female, and he gave us dominion over all of the earth. He told us to be fruitful, to multiply, and everything was ours. And the commands were simple. Don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and don't eat from the tree of life. It was that simple in the beginning. And this is our story. And all we had to do was listen. All we had to do was follow God's command, and everything would have been so wonderful. Instead, we find ourselves in this mess that we are in today. We didn't know it at the time, but beyond all that we could see in realms that we do not understand, there was one who had sought to be like God and had been cast out of God's heaven and took on the form of a serpent. And this one set out to ruin all of God's plans for us. In our frailty and in our weakness, we were deceived. The woman and the man both listened to the evil one and forgot the commands of the Creator. And in that moment, in that initial sin, everything changed. And when God asked about it, there was cover-up, there was lies, there was passing of blame, because there was no way we were going to admit our own sin. Oh, what could have been. But God knew. That's the thing. God always knows. And the problem is that sin cannot dwell in the presence of God. Sin requires judgment. So not only did we lose our home in the garden, but our fellowship with God was also broken. Every part of this mess today goes back to that original sin. And even in our banishment, God promised us, though, that someday that there would be a way for us to come back home. Someday the head of the serpent would be crushed, but it would be in God's time. And along the way, God would give us every opportunity possible to make things right and to do what he has asked us to do, but we wouldn't. In fact, it didn't really take us very long, and as we began to populate the world, sin grew deeper and deeper, and before long, murder. Even though human life is sacred from conception to eternity, we found ways to deny its sanctity. And as we began to spread out, we took our evil with us all over the world. The more we lived and dwelled in the pleasures of the world, the less we depended on God and the truth of God. We became more important than God's commands. Wealth became more important than God's commands. Power and prestige rose like a stench in the nostrils of the Creator. And finally, the Most High God, the Holy One, said, "Enough. No more of this." And he pronounced judgment. And yet, as he did in his great love for his creation, he brought his gaze to one man. And he looked upon him. And he said, "You are devout. And you are holy, the only one out of all creation." And God said, "There is going to be judgment, but through you there is also going to be hope." And so our great ancestor Noah gathered together his family. He told them God is going to destroy the world with a flood. A world where it had never rained was going to experience a catastrophe. He looked at him, he said, "We're going to build an ark, and you're going to go with me into the ark." And it took over 100 years. His neighbors laughed at him. They ridiculed him. And Noah kept building. Even at times, his sons grew weary with him in this whole thing, but Noah just kept on going, and finally it was finished. And those around him mocked him and called him names, but he gathered the animals and his family, and the Lord himself shut them inside of the great vessel, and then boom, the waters below the earth and under the earth and everywhere exploded, and thunder crashed through the sky, and suddenly there was a flood, and the rains came down and covered all of the earth. Every living thing not in the ark was destroyed. The laughter and the mockery turned into wailing and anguish, and God's holy judgment was unleashed. Eventually, the rain stopped and the waters receded. The boat came to rest. The land had been forever changed, and it began to dry up, and God opened the door, and they came out. It was a second chance, which sounds absolutely wonderful. But as we know, because of the mess we are in today, it didn't work out. Oh, what could have been? God looked at Noah and at Noah's family, and he said the same thing he had said in the creation. Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth. Enjoy everything I've given you. And it didn't take long for the trouble to start again. Heck, it started with Noah's lack of self-control and the actions of his sons that caused everything to change, and again sin sets in. Now, they were quite fruitful, Noah, his sons and wives, and their wives, and they did begin to fill the whole earth, but pride rose up yet again, and humans desired to be like God, and they wanted to build a tower to reach to the heavens and to be the ultimate creators of the universe. And God knew this plan. God knew their pride, their wickedness, and God said no. He had made a promise never to destroy the world through a flood again, and in fact, he created a rainbow to remind us of that promise. So God said, let us, which, by the way, is something that is said a lot in the Old Testament as we go through our story. It's hard for us to understand, but from the beginning, it has been clear that our God, our one God, hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God, the Lord is one, is manifested as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Before all things were, they are. God said, let us confuse the speech of mankind. Let us scatter them. And it happened. And now we have languages and people spread out all over this globe. We could have lived in a world of idyllic peace and joy, and yet we have chosen not to. Oh, what could have been? Yet through it all, God had a plan. We can see it now, but it wasn't always clear as it unfolded. One day, God spoke to an old man named Abram. And he said, go, I'm preparing a place for you. Leave everything. Go there. And not only am I preparing a place for you, but in my time and in my way, I will establish my eternal kingdom, and we are going to bless the whole world through you. Abram, you have no children, but your children will be more numerous than the stars in the sky. You can look around today. Despite this mess that we are in, and there are more of us than we can count, because God knows each and every one of us, and we are all descended from the promise to be more numerous than the stars. In fact, we are in that family because of that promise. So Abram obeyed, kinda. I mean, if you really look at the story, he didn't do everything God said to do right away. But eventually he did. Eventually he went to the land. God promised him a son. God changed his name and his wife's name. They tried to take things into their own hands instead of waiting on God and God's timing, and that's the good part of the reason we're in the mess we are even up until today. But finally, though, God gave Abraham and Sarah that son. And that son grew up until one day God said, give the son back. Abram, I need you to make a sacrifice. I need you to take that which you have longed for, and I need you to lay him at my feet and offer him to me, offer his life to me. Abraham, obey. The thing is, Abraham obeyed, but not only Abraham, but so did Isaac. They obeyed, and as they walked, Isaac asked, Father, where is the lamb for the sacrifice? And Abraham replied, God will provide the lamb. That's a truth we must understand, children, as I tell this story. God's holiness requires a sacrifice to atone for the sin of mankind and to restore the relationship of God and man. And for God to do everything God can do in someone's life, a price must be paid. The price for sin so that we can enter into the presence of God. But the good news is, just as Abraham was about to make the sacrifice, God intervened and said, Abraham, you believed. Your faith is strong. I have the lamb for you. And out of a thicket they took a lamb. There was a chance in that moment when God provided the lamb for that moment to make it right. Oh, what could have been. But humanity got in the way yet again. Within Abraham's family, problems arose. A separation occurred. Lot decided to dwell among the wicked of the earth, and the wickedness far out exceeded anything that had ever happened before. Left to themselves, humans will always follow, almost always, the path of sin. Sodom and Gomorrah will be no more, God said. He looked at it and said, that's enough. But Abraham pleaded for God's mercy. Abraham came before him and said, have mercy on the city, have mercy on my family. And even though judgment was coming, God said, I'll give you a way out. And yet not all of them took it. God made a promise to Abraham, though, and God's promises never fail. Isaac grew. Isaac had children. He actually had twins, Esau and Jacob. They didn't always get along. They fought like, brothers. They fought like brothers. They disagreed. There was manipulation. There was lies. There was trickeries. All kinds of things going on, and it ended up with Jacob getting the birthright and Esau wanting to kill him. So Jacob ran away, but then something really cool happened. He met a girl. A beautiful girl, it says, with great eyes. There was love, and yet even in that moment there was deception and there was trouble. And finally, Jacob married this girl. Well, he actually married two girls, which, by the way, is something we do not recommend today. He had a whole bunch of sons, and these sons grew up. But the reality is one of these sons was his favorite. There was one that he loved so much. The next to the youngest one, Joseph, captured his dad's heart. Now, as a young child, Joseph was a bit of a tattletale, but he was growing into a good man, and he knew God. His brothers, on the other hand, were a little jealous of him and the great clothes that Joseph got to wear. And one day they attacked him, threw him in a pit, and then went home and told Jacob he was dead. And then they said, let's sell him off to some distant relatives of ours who happened to be slave traders, and they took him off to Egypt, and they thought that's the end of the story. It's over. He's gone. But God had other plans, because in Egypt he got sold to just the right place. He remained truthful to his God. He had impeccable character. He was rising to strength and power in the house of a powerful man. Oh, what could have been. But then sin. It's always sin. The man's wife wanted to do things with Joseph that were wrong, and when Joseph refused and ran out of her presence, she became vengeful. She told lies about Joseph and accused him of wicked things, and ultimately her husband had him thrown in jail. Joseph, all along the way, didn't even try to defend himself. He just trusted God. In prison, Joseph made friends. Can you imagine making friends in prison? And through a series of events, some people would say they were coincidences. I say they're providences, because God was behind it all. Joseph ended up working in Pharaoh's house, the house of the king. In fact, because of the godly character Joseph had, he soon rose to the position of being the second most powerful man in all of Egypt, which worked out pretty well since famine was about to hit that part of the world, and famine did hit. It hit hard, and it hit all the way back to Canaan, where Jacob and Joseph's brothers had lived, and it had been a couple decades since they'd even seen him. They thought he was dead. He was a distant memory, and yet God still had a plan, because he had made a promise to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, and through Joseph for the whole world. When the food ran out, the brothers had to go to Egypt to get some more. Joseph recognized him right away. They didn't recognize him. Over time, they had to come back again through a series of events and things that happened. Joseph and his brothers were reunited, and Joseph not only forgave them, he brought them to Egypt, provided them food, provided them a place to live, provided them everything the second most powerful human in the world could give. And God's people, all of them, moved to Egypt in great wealth and great comfort. Oh, what could it have been? But time passed. And evil was still in the world, and years later a new king rose who did not know Joseph. And he saw how the people had multiplied, and he was worried about his power, so he enslaved them and made them work and treated them poorly and tortured them and did all kinds of evil against God's children. And isn't that what the world does? It does not love God's children. In the midst of it all, though, these people continued to be fruitful and to multiply, and children were being born. And Pharaoh said, "Kill them. Don't let them live. Toss those babies in the river." But one mother looked for another way. She built an ark, like Noah had done. And God said, "Out of an ark I am going to bring salvation yet again. Out of this wood I am going to bring salvation." She placed her baby in it, and God directed currents and feet and words until the baby ended up being raised in the house of Pharaoh and weaned by his real mother. He grew up until the time he thought he could deliver God's people by his own hand. He killed an Egyptian and was shocked when his own people turned on him. He wanted to be the deliverer, but instead he became a fugitive and ran. He fled to the desert, yet God still had a plan. And in the desert, God broke him and humbled him and taught him. And in God's time, the one who is the great I Am called him. Through time and a series of events, God began to work. And God has brought us to this moment in time. God has shown his power to Pharaoh. God has shown his power to us. And I have recorded these words telling of that journey so that all will remember. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, "This month is to be for you the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are determining the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat, but the lamb must be available to all. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they will eat the lambs. That same night they are to eat meat roasted over the fire along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or boiled in water, but roast it over a fire with the head, legs, and internal organs. Do not leave any of it till morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. This is how you are to eat it. With your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand, eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. This is a day you are to commemorate for the generations to come. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. For 7 days you are to eat bread without yeast. On the first day, remove the yeast from your houses. For whoever eats anything with yeast in it from the first day through the 7th must be cut off from Israel. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly, and another one on the 7th day. Do not work at all on these days, except to prepare food for everyone to eat. That is all you may do. Celebrate the festival of unleavened bread, because it was on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. In the first month, you are to eat bread without yeast from the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. For 7 days, no yeast is to be found in your houses, and anyone, whether foreign or native born, who eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off from the community of Israel. Eat nothing made of yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go at once. and select the animals for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and put some on the blood on the top and on both sides of the door frame. None of you shall go out of the door of your house until morning. None of you shall go out of your house until morning, because you must be covered with the blood of the Lamb to receive life. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the doorframe and will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. Obey these instructions as a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants. And when you enter the land the Lord will give you as he promised, observe this ceremony. And when your children ask, what does this ceremony mean to you? You tell them, it is a Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians. Then the people bowed down in worship. The Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. At midnight, the Lord struck down the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. I remind you that we all stand in judgment before God. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing, and there was not a house without someone dead. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up! Leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks, your herds, as you have said, and go. Also bless me." The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we will all die. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs wrapped in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and clothing. The Lord made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people, and they gave them what they asked for, so they plundered the Egyptians just as God had told Moses they would do. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Sukkoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. Many other people went up with them, and also large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. With the dough the Israelites had brought from Egypt, they baked loaves of unleavened bread. The dough was without yeast because they had been driven out of Egypt and did not have time to prepare food for themselves. Now the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions left Egypt. Because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt, on this night, all the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for generations to come. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "These are the regulations for the Passover meal. No foreigner may eat it. Any slave you have brought may eat it after you have circumcised him, but a temporary resident or a hired worker may not eat it. Only those who are part of the family can partake. It must be eaten inside of the house. Take none of the meat outside the house. Do not break any of the bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate it. A foreigner residing among you who wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover must have all the males in his household circumcised, then he may take part like one born in the land. No uncircumcised male may eat it." To receive the protection and the grace and the blood of the Lamb, you must become part of the family. The same law applies both to the native born and to the foreigner residing among you. All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. And on that very day, the Lord brought the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions. And that was our journey. From Abraham to Exodus, as I recorded it, but you know what? God had a plan. The journey wasn't completed with the Exodus. God's holiness requires judgment. God's holiness requires sacrifice that takes sins away. God's holiness requires a lamb whose blood takes away the power of sin and death, and God's mercy provided the lamb. God is holy, and God is merciful, and God in human form, Jesus Christ, came to take away the sins of the world. The journey in many ways was completed when Jesus hung on a cross and bled and died during the time of Passover, during the time of remembrance, just as Moses had said there should be. And he cried out from that cross, "Tetelestai, it is finished." It is finished, a word that means we have accomplished everything we set out, the plan that was put into motion from the time the first sin happened in the Garden of Eden until Calvary. It was finished, one sacrifice for all time. And God's redeeming power is available to everyone who is in the family and to everyone who is covered by the blood of the Lamb. God's promise to Abraham is fulfilled, and someday this journey will be completed, and we will all be home together, one family. And all we have to do is understand the holiness of God and accept the grace of God, and that is the journey from Abraham to Exodus to Jesus to eternity. Oh, what has been, and oh, what will be someday. Lord, we gather in this place today and we listen to a story. Your story. It is your story that is ultimately filled with a simple truth: you love us. You are holy and you are God. And in your holiness, yes, there is judgment, but yes, there is mercy and there is grace. And so we worship you and we praise you because of who you are and what you have done for us. In Jesus' name, amen.